The human brain is a marvel. It can compose symphonies and split the atom. But every now and then, it produces an idea so spectacularly bad, it deserves its own monument. These are 10 true stories dedicated to those monuments. We're not here to just laugh. We're here to understand the anatomy of a catastrophic failure in judgment. A necessary warning. The events you're about to hear are real and had permanent consequences. This is a field guide to what not to do, ever. 1. The quest for the perfect romantic spot is a tale as old as time. But this particular story is a brutal reminder that sometimes mood and stupidity are walking hand in hand. We're in Ukraine on a warm summer night. Our heroes are a young couple, filled with that fiery, invincible passion that only young love can produce. They wanted to find a place that was private, unique, and a little bit dangerous. A spot that would make their romantic encounter feel like a scene from a movie. They didn't choose a moonlit beach or a secluded forest clearing. No, their idea of a perfect love nest was a set of active railway tracks. You have to understand the mindset here. For them, this wasn't just a pile of steel and gravel. It was symbolic. The cold, hard tracks represented the mundane world, and they were going to create a bubble of pure human passion right in the middle of it. They probably felt like rebels, poets, the main characters in their own epic love story. So they lay down together between the rails, the world around them melting away into the sounds of crickets and their own heartbeats. They were so completely engrossed in each other, so lost in the moment that their senses tuned out everything else. They didn't feel the faint, deep vibration that started to hum through the tracks. They didn't hear the distant, mournful cry of a train horn cutting through the night air. They didn't see the single bright light that appeared on the horizon and began to grow steadily, relentlessly larger. The train, a massive, multi-ton freight locomotive, was not on a romantic journey. It was on a schedule. The engineer, sitting high in his cab, probably saw a strange, fleeting shape on the tracks ahead. A moment of surreal confusion, a desperate blast of the horn, the screech of emergency brakes that he knew were useless against the impossible math of momentum and distance. There was nothing he could do. The train didn't have the capacity for poetry or passion. It only had a destination. The couple had been searching for a moment of timeless passion, and they found it on a timeline that was brutally, unforgivingly precise. 2. There's a certain type of pet owner, the kind of person who doesn't just have a pet, but wields it like a personality trait. They don't get a golden retriever. They get a tarantula, a scorpion, or in this case, a piranha. Our story is about a man in Germany who was immensely proud of his toothy, aquatic roommate. He didn't just see a fish, he saw a statement, a living, swimming testament to how cool and edgy he was. He loved showing it off to his friends, tapping on the glass, boasting about its legendary appetite. One day, it was time to clean the piranha's tank, its glass kingdom. The proper, sane procedure would be to carefully net the fish and place it in a temporary container. But our hero saw this as an opportunity, a chance to prove the special bond he shared with his little carnivore. He was going to clean the tank with the fish still inside, to show everyone he wasn't afraid. He rolls up his sleeves and plunges his hands into the water, scrubbing away at the algae. The piranha just darts around, probably annoyed at this giant fleshy monster invading its home. Feeling a surge of confidence, our hero decides to get playful. He looks at his pet, smirks, and starts to playfully waggle his finger in the water, like you would with a puppy. Who's a cute little killing machine? You are. Yes, you are, he probably cooed. For the piranha, this was not a cute game. It was a wriggling, fleshy worm appearing directly in front of its face. It wasn't personal. It was business. With the speed of instinct, the piranha did what piranhas have been doing for millions of years. It bit him. Hard. The man yanked his hand out of the water with a scream, looking down in disbelief to see the tip of his finger completely gone. The sudden shock, the searing pain, the sight of his own blood. It was too much for his brain to handle. He stumbled backward in a blind panic, lost his footing on the wet floor and fell, cracking his head fatally against the hard tile. He died right there on his kitchen floor. The irony is almost poetic. The piranha didn't kill him. A simple slip and fall did. The fish just provided the bloody, finger-shortening motivation. He wanted to show he had mastered nature, but in the end, he was taken down by a combination of his own hubris and a slippery floor. 3. The final entry in his own journal is a story that exists in that strange, terrifying space between scientific dedication and terminal arrogance. Our protagonist is a Russian scientist, a brilliant man working in a high-security lab with some of the deadliest substances known to humanity. His specific field of expertise? The Marburg virus, a nasty cousin of Ebola that essentially liquefies you from the inside out. He was a man who lived and breathed protocols. He understood the stakes. He knew that the thinnest layer of latex, the slightest breach in procedure, was the only thing standing between him and a horrific, agonizing death. He was meticulous, he was careful, but over the years, a subtle, dangerous change had taken place. Familiarity had bred a quiet, deep-seated confidence. He saw the virus not as an implacable enemy, but as a subject he had mastered. One day, while handling a sample, it happened. A tiny, almost insignificant mistake. A slip of the hand, a moment of distraction, and the needle, slick with the virus, pricked his finger through his double layer of gloves. It was a minuscule wound, but in his world, it was a gunshot. The protocol was clear. Declare an immediate emergency, begin post-exposure treatment, alert the entire facility. This was his only slim chance of survival. But the scientist didn't follow protocol. In a decision that still baffles the medical community, he did nothing. He simply took off his gloves, bandaged his finger, and told no one. Perhaps his pride was too great to admit a mistake. Perhaps he believed his own safety measures were so perfect that infection was impossible. Or perhaps, in a dark, twisted way, the scientist in him saw an opportunity. He had become his own experiment. He went home, and over the next 2 weeks, he began to document his own demise. With chilling scientific detachment, he chronicled every stage of the virus's brutal assault on his body in his personal journal. The initial fever, the crippling headaches, the hemorrhaging, the organ failure. He was a passenger in his own body, taking notes as it was systematically torn apart. He transformed his own death into his final, unauthorized research paper. He continued to write right up until the very end, his handwriting growing weaker and more erratic, until the entries finally, abruptly, stopped. He had dedicated his life to studying a deadly virus, and in his final act, he provided the most intimate, detailed data imaginable, a legacy written in his own blood. 4. The Ultimate Game of Chicken is a story that perfectly captures the teenage brain's unique ability to look at a terrible idea and see a glorious opportunity for immortality. We're in a small town, the kind of place where the most exciting thing to happen all week is the passing of the midnight freight train. For a group of local teenagers, this train wasn't just a part of the landscape, it was a challenge. It was their mechanical dragon, and they were the brave knights who would prove their courage by facing it down. They invented a game, a high-stakes ritual of bravery and bravado. They would stand on the tracks, side by side, as the train barreled towards them, its horn blasting, its single light cutting through the darkness like the eye of a monster. The goal was to be the last one to jump off the tracks before the train arrived. The winner got bragging rights, respect, and the temporary title of the toughest kid in town. On this particular night, the game was more intense than ever. The air was thick with tension and cheap bravado. The train appeared on the horizon. The ground began to vibrate. The boys lined up on the tracks, their hearts pounding in their chests. As the train got closer, the noise becoming a deafening roar, the first kid jumped, then another. The group thinned out until only 2 remained, locked in a silent battle of wills. One of them, seeing the immense wall of steel just seconds away, finally broke and leaped to safety. But our hero, the last one standing, wanted more than just a win. He wanted a legend. He wanted a story that would be told for years. He was going to wait until the absolute last possible fraction of a second. He stood his ground, a smirk on his face, the wind from the approaching train whipping through his hair. He could probably feel the heat from its engines. He was ready for his heroic last-second leap. But he made a tiny, fatal miscalculation. He underestimated the sheer, deceptive speed of a freight train. He thought he had another second. He didn't. He finally jumped, but his timing was off by a mere heartbeat. The edge of the locomotive caught him, its immense force turning his leap for glory into a final, tragic stumble. He had won the game. He was the undisputed champion. He just wasn't around to collect his prize. He had gambled everything for a fleeting moment of pure respect and discovered that the train always wins. 5. The final boarding call is a story about a man whose frustration with modern air travel went from angry tweet to terminal-wide disaster in record time. Our scene is a bustling Canadian airport. Our hero is a man who has just been informed that his flight is cancelled. We've all been there. The sigh of frustration. The long, soul-crushing line at the customer service desk. The quiet acceptance of your fate. But this man was not built for quiet acceptance. He was a man of action, a man who believed that the rules of civilized society were merely suggestions for other people. He decided he was going to stage a protest, not by holding a sign or chanting slogans. His protest was going to be a piece of performance art, a bold statement against the tyranny of the airlines. He stormed over to the baggage claim area, and with a look of righteous fury on his face, he climbed onto the baggage carousel. This was his stage. He probably imagined himself riding it around in a slow, dignified loop, a symbol of the stranded passenger, a hero for the common traveler. The other passengers just stared, a mix of confusion and, "I should probably film this," excitement. But our protester hadn't thought his plan through. He hadn't considered that the baggage carousel isn't just a loop, it's an entrance. As he rode along, feeling the righteous fire of his cause, he was carried inexorably towards the big black rubber curtains that lead to the mysterious, hidden world of the baggage handling system. He didn't jump off. He just rode right through them, disappearing from public view like a piece of lost luggage. On the other side, he found himself in a mechanical labyrinth of conveyor belts, rollers, and sorting machines, a place not designed for human beings. He was tumbled from one belt to another, a human pinball in a system designed to move suitcases. His one-man protest came to a sudden grinding halt when he became entangled in the powerful machinery. The entire baggage system, a marvel of modern logistics, was brought to a screeching stop by a single, very determined and very foolish man. When the airport staff finally located him, his protest had been noted, but not in the way he had intended. He had wanted to make a statement about his canceled flight, but the only statement he made was about the dangers of treating an industrial conveyor system like your personal soapbox. 6. The most powerful drain cleaner known to man is a tale of domestic warfare, a story about a man who faced a common household problem and decided to solve it with a solution that was anything but common. Our hero had a clogged toilet, a stubborn, unyielding blockage that mocked his every attempt with the plunger. He was frustrated. He was angry. He saw this not as a simple plumbing issue, but as a personal insult from an inanimate porcelain object. He decided it was time to escalate. Forget drain cleaner. Forget calling a plumber. He was going to bring out the heavy artillery. He went to his garage and returned not with a snake, but with a full gallon of gasoline. His logic was a thing of beautiful, terrifying simplicity. If gasoline can power a car, surely it can obliterate a toilet clog. He unscrewed the cap and poured the entire gallon of flammable liquid down the toilet bowl. The bathroom was instantly filled with a dizzying, eye-watering cloud of gasoline fumes. He stood back, admiring his work, probably feeling like a genius. But he wasn't done. The gasoline needed a catalyst, an ignition source to unleash its true, clog-destroying potential. So, he struck a match. In that split second, as the tiny flame flickered to life, he was probably imagining a satisfying whoosh that would clear the pipe and solve his problem forever. What he got was not a whoosh. What he got was a deafening, house-shaking explosion. The concentrated gasoline fumes in the small, enclosed bathroom detonated with the force of a bomb. The toilet itself was vaporized, turned into porcelain shrapnel. The walls blew out. The roof was lifted clean off its foundations. And our hero, the man who just wanted to unclog his toilet, was sent on a one-way, non-stop trip through the brand-new skylight where his ceiling used to be. He was launched into the air by a geyser of fire and fury, a human cannonball propelled by his own brilliant idea. When the fire department arrived, they found a scene of utter devastation. The bathroom was gone, the house was a wreck, and the clog, presumably, was no longer an issue. He had successfully cleared the blockage, but at a slightly higher cost than a bottle of Drano. 7. The Lobster and the Ill-Advised Hiding Spot is a beautiful story about a man whose criminal ambitions were ultimately foiled by his own terrible understanding of marine biology. Our scene is a grocery store, specifically the seafood department, where a majestic, live lobster sits in its tank, probably dreaming of the deep ocean, completely unaware it's about to become the star of a low-budget crime drama. Our protagonist is a shoplifter, a man who saw this delicious crustacean and decided it was going home with him free of charge. But how do you discreetly steal a live, kicking lobster? You can't just put it in your pocket. So, he devised a plan of such breathtaking audacity, it borders on performance art. He grabbed the lobster out of the tank, a wriggling, angry bundle of claws and antennae, and in a single, fluid motion, he stuffed it down the front of his trousers. This was his hiding spot, his personal, fleshy smuggling compartment. He probably thought he was a genius, a master of disguise. He casually adjusted himself and began to walk towards the exit, trying to look as normal as possible, despite the fact that he had a very angry, very much alive sea creature currently exploring his nether regions. The lobster, however, was not happy with its new accommodations. It had been abruptly removed from its comfortable, watery home and shoved into a dark, warm, and decidedly non-aquatic environment. And when lobsters are unhappy, they have a very specific, very effective way of expressing their displeasure. They use their claws. As our shoplifter neared the automatic doors, just moments away from a successful getaway, the lobster decided it had had enough. It clamped down with its powerful pincer on the most sensitive, most private, most you-do-not-touch-that area imaginable. The result was not a quiet whimper of discomfort. It was a high-pitched, soul-shattering shriek of pure, unadulterated agony that echoed through the entire grocery store. The man dropped to his knees, his carefully constructed composure instantly vaporized, his hands frantically trying to deal with the crustacean crisis happening in his pants. His screams immediately alerted the security guards, who rushed over to find a grown man writhing on the floor, apparently in a fight to the death with his own crotch. The subsequent arrest was, to put it mildly, embarrassing. He had tried to get a free meal, but instead, he got a very painful, very public, and irreversible vasectomy courtesy of an angry crustacean, proving there's more than one way to permanently remove yourself from the gene pool. 8. The shortcut through the parking garage is a tale of a man who was in such a hurry to escape the law that he ended up finding the fastest possible route back to ground level. Our story begins with a car thief in California, living life in the fast lane, literally. He's just boosted a car and is now engaged in a high-speed chase with the police. Sirens are wailing, tires are screeching. It's a classic scene. But the cops are sticking to him like glue. He needs a plan. He needs to lose them. He sees a multi-story parking garage and has a flash of inspiration. This is it, his sanctuary. His plan is to speed into the garage, race up the spiraling ramps, and hide on the top level. The cops will be confused. He'll have time to ditch the car and disappear into the urban jungle. It's a solid, if unoriginal, getaway strategy. He swerves off the street and into the garage, the squeal of his tires echoing off the concrete walls. He floors it, rocketing up the ramps, taking the tight turns at a speed that would make a professional stunt driver nervous. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. He's a blur of stolen metal and bad decisions. He's so focused on gaining height, so consumed by the thrill of the ascent, that he's not really paying attention to where he's going. He's just thinking up. He finally reaches the top floor, the open-air roof of the parking garage. This is where he was supposed to stop, hide, and complete his brilliant escape. But in his adrenaline-fueled frenzy, he forgot the most important part of the plan. The stopping part. He shot up the final ramp at full speed and just kept going. He didn't slow down. He didn't turn. He crashed directly through the thin concrete barrier at the edge of the roof, the one that's only there to stop people who are parking, not people who are actively trying to achieve low Earth orbit. For a brief, glorious moment, the car was airborne, soaring silently through the city skyline. And then, gravity, which had been patiently waiting, decided to rejoin the chat. The car plunged several stories, landing back on the street below with a deafening metallic crunch, not far from where the chase had begun. He had successfully saved himself the time and effort of driving back down the ramps. His escape was, in a way, a complete success. He had lost the police, but in the process, he had also lost his battle with basic common sense and the unforgiving laws of physics. 9. The $5 victory that cost a fortune is a story that perfectly illustrates the concept of winning the battle, but losing the war in the most painful way imaginable. We find ourselves in a noisy, crowded bar in Louisiana, the kind of place where masculinity is measured in bold claims and stupid bets. Our hero, a man who clearly valued his pride far more than his internal organs, found himself in the middle of a heated challenge. The object of contention? A large, menacing jar of pickled ghost peppers sitting on the bar. For those unfamiliar, a ghost pepper isn't just spicy. It's a culinary supernova, a tiny red demon that exists solely to punish your taste buds. One of his friends, probably after a few too many beers, pointed at the jar and laid down the gauntlet. $5 to the man who could eat the entire thing. $5. The price of a cheap beer. A laughably small amount of money. But for our hero, it wasn't about the money. It was about glory. It was about honor. He looked at the jar, then at his skeptical friends, and accepted the challenge. The bar gathered around, a circle of cheering, jeering spectators ready to watch a man go to war with a vegetable. He opened the jar, the vinegary, spicy smell probably stinging his nostrils, and began his epic quest. The first pepper went down. A moment of silence, then a grimace. The second. Sweat started to bead on his forehead. By the fourth or fifth pepper, he was a mess. His face was beet red, tears were streaming from his eyes, and he was sweating so profusely it looked like he'd just run a marathon. But he would not be defeated. Egged on by the roaring approval of his friends, he powered through, shoveling pepper after pepper into his mouth, his esophagus screaming in protest. He was a gladiator, and the peppers were his lions. Finally, with one last heroic gulp, he swallowed the final pepper. The jar was empty. The crowd went wild. He had done it. He stood up, trembling but triumphant, and collected his prize, a crumpled $5 bill. But as the cheers faded, a new sensation began to take over. The ghost peppers, having conquered his mouth and throat, were now waging an all-out war on his insides. His throat began to swell, constricting with alarming speed. He started to gasp for air. His body, overwhelmed by the insane amount of capsaicin he had just ingested, went into full-blown anaphylactic shock. He collapsed on the floor of the bar, his $5 victory prize still clutched in his hand. He had won the bet. He had earned the respect of his drunk friends for 5 glorious minutes. But in his pursuit of that cheap victory, he had paid the ultimate price. He learned, far too late, that some bragging rights just aren't worth it. 10. The roach, the bug spray, and the Big Bang Theory is a powerful lesson in overkill. A story about a woman who saw a tiny problem and decided to solve it with a solution of truly apocalyptic proportions. Our scene is a quiet kitchen. Our hero is a woman who has just spotted her mortal enemy, a single, defiant cockroach, skittering across her pristine countertop. For many, this is a moment for a shoe, a rolled-up magazine, or a well-aimed paper towel. But for this woman, the sight of this insect triggered something deep and primal. This wasn't just a pest. It was an invader, a personal affront to her domestic tranquility. This called for total annihilation. She went to her cupboard and retrieved her weapon of choice, a large industrial-sized can of insecticide. She wasn't just going to kill this cockroach, she was going to erase it from existence. She aimed the nozzle and began to spray, and she didn't stop. She chased the roach around the kitchen, dousing it in a thick, choking cloud of poison. The roach ran under the stove behind the fridge, but she was relentless, emptying the entire can of bug spray into her small, enclosed kitchen until the air was a thick, flammable fog. The cockroach, presumably, was very, very dead. Victory was hers. She stood back, breathing heavily in the chemical haze, probably feeling a sense of profound satisfaction. But in her single-minded crusade against this one tiny insect, she had completely forgotten about the basic principles of chemistry. She had turned her kitchen into a giant sealed fuel air bomb, and all it needed was a spark. That spark came from the pilot light on her gas stove. The tiny, unassuming blue flame, which had been patiently waiting, kicked on to regulate the oven temperature. The moment it flickered to life, it ignited the highly concentrated insecticide fumes. The result wasn't just a fire. It was a massive explosion that blew the windows out, sent the cabinet doors flying off their hinges, and engulfed the entire room in a fireball. She had successfully taken out the cockroach. She had won the war, but she had also taken out her kitchen, her eyebrows, and a significant portion of her house. When the fire department arrived, they were probably baffled by the sheer scale of the destruction. It was a powerful and hilarious reminder that when you're trying to solve a small problem, it's generally a bad idea to use a solution that could be classified as a weapon of mass destruction. So, after all these stories, here's the real question that matters. We've all had that moment, that hold my beer idea that seemed brilliant for a split second. Be honest in the comments. What is the dumbest, most dangerous thing you've ever almost done before that little voice of reason kicked in and saved you? Let's see who has the best, almost a Darwin Award story. And hey, if this video made you feel grateful for your own survival instincts, show some love with a like. Subscribe for more proof that common sense is a superpower.